This is David Brown. I hope you enjoy this video short, but know that this is only for informational purposes. It does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the firm, and we recommend that you contact a licensed attorney if you have any questions or concerns about the information provided. We're often asked this question when we're working through a PERM process: what happens if we find a qualified candidate? What happens to the foreign national and what happens to this application? Well, it really depends on whether or not the person is truly qualified and whether we can rule them out through the process. Someone is truly qualified if they are a U.S. worker, meaning they're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident or have an unrestricted right to work in the U.S. And they meet the requirements of the position as the position is drafted and explained to any applicant. Assuming they meet those requirements, we look at a variety of other factors that are important to the hiring considerations. If you're an employer who always requires a certain type of litmus test for any new applicant, maybe it's an English language test, maybe it's a specific engineering test that everyone goes through, we could have that person go through that test, and obviously if they don't meet the test requirements, they would not be qualified. We look at whether or not there's a certain language requirement in that job. We also look at their background in terms of their employment history. If they've been fired from jobs, if an employer would not rehire them, that could be a reason why someone who otherwise looks qualified on paper is actually not qualified and can be ruled out. Assuming, though, that we find someone who cannot be ruled out through any of these means, we have a qualified candidate. And by law, we are not in a position to file a PERM application unless we can rule that person out. The only other option is if you have another position at the employment site for which this individual can be considered. And if you make an offer to that individual either for that position or for the applicant's position, understand that if they accept it, that's fine. If they choose not to accept it, that's also fine, as long as you have a position available to the individual. We often get the related question, well, does this mean if we find someone qualified, we have to let the foreign worker go? And the direct answer is no. Under no circumstances do you ever have to replace the foreign worker. If you find someone who's qualified and you can't rule them out, and we can't file the PERM, that's not the worst thing in the world. What we can do is 6 months later, restart the advertising and go through the process again. In our experience, we typically file over 90% of our PERMs on the first go round. It's less than 10% of our PERMs where we actually find a qualified candidate and have to re-advertise 6 months later. And at this point in our practice, we've never actually been in a position where we found a qualified candidate the second time. So typically, if we can't file it the first time, we're able to file it the second time. If you have a question about your PERM process, please don't hesitate to ask. We'd be happy to help you.